In this question, we're asked to express 4x squared minus 24x minus 189 in the form a x plus b squared plus c, where the constants a, b, and c are to be found. So in this question, we're being asked to complete the square of the expression 4x squared minus 24x minus 189. This is an expression, so it's fine to do along lines of equal signs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off, because I want a single x squared, I'm going to factorise these first pair of terms, take out the common factor of 4. So I get left with 4x squared minus 6x minus 189. I'm then going to complete the square for the two terms inside the bracket. So 4, I'll use a square bracket now since there's a double. I get x minus half the coefficient, so 3 squared, and then I get minus this constant here squared. Minus 189. Okay, I'm going to tidy up inside this bracket. I'm going to tidy up the squared term. So I get 4x minus 3 squared minus 3 is going to give us minus 9 minus 189. Now I'm going to expand the square bracket, so I'm going to do 4 times this bracket and 4 times the minus 9. So I get 4x minus 3 squared minus 36 minus 189. And finally, I can finish off just by tidying up the constants. And notice how I leave the constant. I don't touch the constant. It's the very last thing I do. So I get 4x minus 3 squared. And minus 36 minus 189 gives me minus 225. Okay, so part B says use your answer to part A to solve the equation 4x squared minus 24x minus 189 equals 0. So if this was part A, part B is now, let's say, okay, well, let's solve for lots of 3x minus 3 squared minus 225 equal to 0. So I'm going to start by adding 225 to both sides. So I get 4x minus 3 squared equals 225. I'm now going to get rid of this coefficient. I'm going to divide both sides by 4 so that I get x minus 3 all squared equals 225 over 4. Now at this point, to get to the x, I'm going to have to do a square root. Please remember that it's not just a negative, it's not just a square root, but it's positive and negative square root. So what I get is x minus 3 left on its own now is equal to plus or minus the square root of 225. Actually, let's rewrite that slightly. I can save myself a couple of steps, because what we can do is we can rewrite this as a square root at the top and over the square root at the bottom. So square root of 225 over the square root of 4. Now hopefully you know your square numbers and know that x minus 3 will then be equal to square root of 225 is 15. Square root of 4 is 2. So all that's left to do is add 3 to both sides so that we get left with the solution of x being equal to x equal to 3 plus or minus 15 over 2. Now, finally, let's just finish this off then. Let's do x plus 15, let's do 3 plus 15 over 2. So remember that 3 equals 6 over 2 if you write it as fractions. So I get 6 over 2 plus 15 over 2 is 21 over 2. And if I do 6 over 2 minus 15 over 2, I get minus 9 over 2. Okay, well let's have a look and see how the marks are awarded in this question. In part A, you get a B1 mark for each one of the three terms A, B and C that you get correct. So that's a B1, that's a B1, that's a B1. So you just get standalone marks for each one of the A, B and C that you get correct. In part 2, we get a method mark if you have correctly rearranged to get 4x minus 3 squared is equal to 225. Next, you get another method mark if you get to x minus 3 is plus or minus 15 over 2. And then finally, you get an answer mark if you correctly get that x is equal to 21 over 2 and minus 9 over 2. Okay, well I hope that all made sense and that you understood how to mark the question.